I am Teresa Miller, 63 years old, a woman who gave up her entire youth stitching clothes, washing dishes, collecting every spare coin to raise my son into the CEO of a multi-million-dollar company. The engagement party at Grand Imperial blazed with hundreds of crystal chandeliers, the scent of champagne mingling with white lilies, and it should have been the proudest moment of my life. I stood there in my pale blue dress, a dress I had personally mended where the seams had frayed, hoping to hear just one word of praise from Andrew. But Brianna, his arrogant fiancée, let her eyes slide over me and laughed. That dress looks like a janitor's uniform that escaped. Laughter erupted, spreading through the hall like wildfire, slicing into my skin. I looked down at the champagne flute in my hand, bubbles popping against the glass, just like my pride dissolving into foam. The ballroom of the Grand Imperial Hotel stretched before me like a cathedral of wealth and power. Marble columns rose toward vaulted ceilings, painted with cherubs and golden clouds. Long tables draped in ivory silk held towers of macarons in pastel shades, ice sculptures shaped like swans, and centerpieces of white orchids that probably cost more than my monthly rent. Waiters in crisp black uniforms glided between guests carrying silver trays of hors d'oeuvres I couldn't pronounce. The air hummed with polite conversation, the clinking of crystal, and the soft jazz quartet playing in the corner beneath a waterfall of fairy lights. I had arrived early, clutching my small purse against my chest like a shield. The invitation had been hand-delivered to my modest apartment 3 weeks prior, embossed with gold lettering that read, "You are cordially invited to celebrate the engagement of Andrew Miller and Brianna Ashford." I had traced my fingers over Andrew's name, remembering the boy who used to fall asleep in my lap while I sewed clothes for other people's children late into the night. That boy was now a man who wore tailored suits and owned corner offices with views of the city skyline. I had sewn this dress myself from fabric I found on sale at a discount store downtown. Pale blue, modest, with 3/4 sleeves and a simple neckline. It wasn't designer, but it was clean and pressed, and made with the same hands that had packed Andrew's lunches every day for 18 years. The same hands that had worked 2 jobs so he could attend business school while his father drank away our savings. I thought if I looked presentable enough, if I smiled warmly enough, maybe I could belong here, even just for one evening. The moment I stepped through the gilded doors, I felt eyes on me. Not the warm, welcoming kind, the assessing kind. The kind that measured your worth by the label inside your collar and the shine of your shoes. A woman in a scarlet gown whispered to her companion as I passed, and they both turned to stare. I kept my chin up and walked toward the reception table where a young woman with sleek black hair and blood-red lipstick stood checking names against a leather-bound guest list. "Name?" she asked without looking up. "Teresa Miller," I said softly. "I'm Andrew's mother?" Her eyes flicked up, traveled from my face down to my shoes, then back up again. The corner of her mouth twitched. "One moment." She tapped something on her tablet, then gestured vaguely toward the far end of the ballroom. "You can wait over there?" Not welcome. Not congratulations. Just wait over there, as if I were a package that had been delivered to the wrong address. I walked to the side of the room, near a towering arrangement of white roses that smelled too sweet, almost sickly. From there, I watched the guests arrive. Women in gowns that shimmered like liquid gold, men in tuxedos with cufflinks that caught the light. They greeted each other with air kisses and practiced laughter, the kind that sounds expensive. I recognized a few faces from the business magazines Andrew used to leave on my kitchen table when he visited, back when he still visited. CEOs, investors, socialites, whose scandals made headlines. Then she arrived. Brianna Ashford entered like a queen ascending her throne. Her gown was the colour of fresh snow, strapless and fitted, with a train that whispered against the marble floor. Diamonds dripped from her ears and throat, catching the light with every movement. Her hair was swept into an elegant updo, not a strand out of place. She was beautiful in the way that magazine covers are beautiful, polished, untouchable, cold. Andrew walked beside her, his hand resting on the small of her back. My son. Tall, broad-shouldered, his dark hair slicked back. His smile the same one I used to see when he brought home good grades or won a soccer game. But now that smile was aimed at her, at the crowd, at everyone except me. I waited for him to see me. I stood a little straighter, smoothed down the front of my dress, but his gaze swept past me as if I were part of the decor, another white flower arrangement against the wall. Brianna's eyes, however, found me immediately. She paused mid-step, her smile freezing in place. Then she leaned toward Andrew and whispered something behind her perfectly manicured hand. He glanced in my direction, his expression flickering with something I couldn't quite name. Embarrassment? Annoyance? Then he nodded and turned back to greet an approaching couple. Brianna's friends materialized around her like a swarm of perfumed bees. 3 women, each more polished than the last, dressed in jewel tones and designer heels that could have paid my rent for 6 months. They whispered and giggled, casting glances my way. One of them, a blonde with a sharp jawline and sharper eyes, said something that made the others burst into laughter. I felt my face grow warm. I looked down at my hands, at the calluses on my palms from years of scrubbing floors and kneading dough. I folded them together and tried to make myself smaller. "Is that her?" one of Brianna's friends said, not bothering to lower her voice. "The mother?" another replied, dragging out the word like it tasted sour. I thought she'd at least try. Brianna turned fully toward me now, her heels clicking against the marble as she approached. Her friends followed, forming a semicircle around me like wolves cornering prey. Up close, her perfume was overwhelming, something floral and expensive that made my eyes water. "Teresa," she said, her voice dripping with false sweetness. "You made it." "Of course," I said, trying to smile. "I wouldn't miss Andrew's engagement party." She tilted her head, her gaze sliding over my dress with the precision of a scalpel. "That's quite a look." Her friends snickered. "I made it myself," I said quietly, hoping that might earn some respect. I had always been proud of my sewing, the way I could take scraps and turn them into something whole. "Oh, we can tell," Brianna said, her smile never wavering. "It's very homemade." More laughter, louder this time. One of her friends, the blonde, stepped closer. "Brianna, darling, is this some kind of theme? Are we doing a Great Depression aesthetic?" The laughter exploded around me, sharp and cruel. I felt my chest tighten, my throat constricting. I wanted to say something, to defend myself, but the words stuck like stones in my mouth. Brianna leaned in, her voice dropping to a mock whisper that everyone could still hear. "Honestly, Teresa, that dress looks like a janitor's uniform that escaped." The world tilted. The chandeliers above blurred into smears of light. The laughter rang in my ears, louder than the jazz quartet, louder than my own heartbeat. I looked past them, desperate to find Andrew, to see if he had heard, if he would step in and say something, anything. But he was across the room, shaking hands with a silver-haired man in a 3-piece suit, his back turned to me. I gripped my champagne glass tighter, the bubbles inside still popping, each one a tiny explosion. I thought about my wedding ring, the one I had sold to pay for Andrew's business school application fees. I thought about the nights I stayed awake sewing until my fingers bled so I could afford his textbooks. I thought about every sacrifice, every missed meal, every dream I had buried so he could rise. And here I stood, a punchline. Brianna's voice cut through my thoughts. Well, we should get back to the important guests. Enjoy the party, Teresa. Try not to spill anything on yourself. They turned and walked away, their laughter trailing behind them like smoke. I stood alone by the white roses, my hands trembling, the champagne in my glass now flat and tasteless. The ballroom spun around me, a carousel of wealth and cruelty, and I was the sideshow attraction. But somewhere, deep beneath the humiliation, beneath the shame, a small flame flickered to life. I was not going to cry. I was not going to leave. I was going to stay. And I was going to remember every single word, every laugh, every glance. Because tonight was not the end of my story. It was the beginning of theirs unraveling. The evening dragged on like a slow funeral march. I stayed rooted near the rose arrangement, watching as guests circulated through the ballroom, their voices blending into a hum of polite insincerity. Waiters passed by with trays of canapés, smoked salmon on crackers, tiny quiches, chocolate-dipped strawberries. But none of them stopped to offer me anything. It was as if I had become invisible, or worse, deliberately ignored. I saw Andrew once more, standing near a cluster of men in expensive suits, his hand gesturing animatedly as he told some story that made them all laugh. He looked so confident, so at ease in this world of marble and champagne. I wanted to walk over, to touch his arm, and remind him that I was here, that I had always been here. But my feet wouldn't move. The weight of Brianna's words pressed down on me like a heavy coat. That dress looks like a janitor's uniform that escaped. I glanced down at the pale blue fabric, at the careful stitches I had sewn by hand, and suddenly I saw it through their eyes. Cheap, outdated, pathetic. My throat burned. I blinked hard, willing the tears not to come. "Excuse me, ma'am." I turned to find a young waiter standing beside me, his face kind but uncertain. He held a tray of empty glasses. "Would you mind holding this for a moment?" he asked. "I need to grab more from the kitchen." Before I could respond, he handed me the tray and hurried off, leaving me standing there with a stack of dirty champagne flutes balanced in my hands. I looked around, confused, wondering if this was some mistake. But then I saw them, Brianna's friends, watching me from across the room, their hands covering their mouths as they giggled. They had sent him over. They had orchestrated this. I set the tray down on a nearby table, my hands shaking. But the damage was done. Other guests had noticed. I saw them whispering, pointing. An older woman in pearls leaned toward her husband and said something that made him chuckle. I wanted to disappear. I wanted the floor to open up and swallow me whole. But I didn't move. I stood there, chin lifted, and met their stares with as much dignity as I could muster. Then Brianna's voice rang out, clear and commanding, cutting through the ambient noise like a knife. "Everyone, can I have your attention, please?" The room fell silent. The jazz quartet stopped mid-song. All eyes turned toward the center of the ballroom, where Brianna stood on a small raised platform, a microphone in her hand. Andrew stood beside her, his arm around her waist, smiling that perfect, practiced smile. "Thank you all so much for being here tonight," Brianna began, her voice smooth and confident. "Andrew and I are so grateful to share this special moment with the people who matter most to us." She paused, letting her gaze sweep across the crowd. It landed on me for just a fraction of a second, and I saw the flicker of amusement in her eyes. "Tonight is about family," she continued, "about the bonds that shape us, the people who build us into who we are." My heart lifted, just slightly. Maybe she was going to acknowledge me. Maybe Andrew had told her to say something kind. "And speaking of family," Brianna said, her smile widening, "I want to take a moment to thank my incredible mother, Patricia Ashford, for her endless support and love." A spotlight swung over to an elegant woman in a silver gown who stood near the front, beaming with pride. The crowd erupted into applause. I waited. Surely Andrew would say something now. Surely he would take the microphone and thank me, the woman who had raised him alone, who had given up everything. But he just smiled and kissed Brianna's cheek. The microphone was passed to someone else, and the speeches moved on. I wasn't mentioned. Not once. It was as if I didn't exist. My chest felt hollow, like someone had scooped out everything inside and left only the shell. I watched as Patricia Ashford accepted her moment in the spotlight, her silver gown glittering, her smile radiant. She waved gracefully to the crowd, and I wondered what it felt like to be celebrated, to be seen, to be valued. I wondered if Andrew had ever once considered what it would mean to me to hear my name spoken aloud in a room full of strangers, to have someone say, "This woman sacrificed everything so her son could stand here today." But that acknowledgement never came. Instead, the speeches continued. Brianna's father stood and told a charming story about how Andrew had asked for his daughter's hand in marriage. One of Andrew's business partners raised a glass and toasted to the power couple of the decade. Friends shared anecdotes about exotic vacations and yacht parties and charity galas. The room sparkled with wealth and privilege, and I was a ghost, haunting the edges, unseen and unheard. I thought about leaving then. I could slip out quietly, call a taxi, go back to my small apartment with its second-hand furniture and the sewing machine that still sat in the corner of the living room, gathering dust. No one would notice. No one would care. But something kept me rooted in place. Maybe it was stubbornness. Maybe it was the faint hope that Andrew would turn around, catch my eye, and remember who I was. Or maybe it was the realization that if I left now, if I let them erase me without a fight, I would be complicit in my own invisibility. So I stayed. I spent the rest of the evening drifting through the ballroom like a ghost. No one spoke to me. No one acknowledged me. I was a shadow in a room full of light. At one point, I found myself near the restroom hallway, away from the crowd, trying to catch my breath. I leaned against the cool marble wall and closed my eyes, letting the muffled sounds of the party wash over me. I thought about leaving. I could call a cab, slip out quietly, and no one would notice. But then I heard voices. Two women, just around the corner, their words drifting toward me. "Did you see Andrew's mother?" "Oh my God, yes. That dress. Brianna said she looks like she just finished mopping the floors." They laughed, the sound sharp and cruel. "I can't believe Andrew invited her. She doesn't fit in at all." Brianna wanted to uninvite her, but Andrew insisted. "He's too soft. She'll have to whip that out of him after the wedding." My hands curled into fists. The humiliation I had been swallowing all night rose up like bile in my throat. But beneath it, something else stirred. Something harder, sharper. Anger. I thought about all the years I had spent protecting Andrew, shielding him from his father's drunken rages, working night shifts so he could have new shoes and hot meals. I thought about the promises he used to make, the way he would hug me and say, When I grow up, Mum, I'm going to take care of you. When had that changed? When had I become something to be ashamed of? I straightened my shoulders and walked back into the ballroom. My steps were slow, measured. I scanned the crowd until I found Brianna, holding court near the dessert table, surrounded by her friends. She was laughing, her head thrown back, her diamonds catching the light. I walked toward her. Her friends noticed me first. Their laughter died, replaced by smirks and raised eyebrows. Brianna turned, her expression shifting from amusement to mild irritation. "Teresa?" she said, her voice dripping with condescension. "Still here?" "I wanted to thank you," I said quietly. She blinked, surprised. "Thank me?" "Yes, for reminding me who I am." Her smile faltered, just slightly. I continued, my voice steady. "I spent so many years thinking that if I worked hard enough, sacrificed enough, gave enough, it would be enough. But tonight, I realized something. No matter what I do, people like you will never see me as anything more than a janitor in a cheap dress." The smile was gone now. Her friends exchanged uncomfortable glances. "But here's the thing," I said, leaning in just slightly. "I may not have your money, or your designer gowns, or your perfect teeth, but I have something you'll never have." "And what's that?" she asked, her voice tight. "I built him," I said, nodding toward Andrew across the room. "Every success he's ever had, every deal he's ever closed, every award he's ever won, it started with me, with my hands, with my work. You may marry him, Brianna, but you'll never own the parts of him that matter, because those belong to me." I turned and walked away before she could respond. My heart was pounding, adrenaline coursing through my veins. I didn't know where that had come from, but it felt good. It felt like reclaiming a small piece of myself. I made my way toward the exit, ready to leave this nightmare behind. But as I reached the door, I heard a commotion behind me. "Stop her!" I turned to see Brianna pointing at me, her face flushed with anger. "That woman is not on the guest list. Security, there's been a mistake." Two security guards appeared, their expressions stern. The entire ballroom went silent, every pair of eyes now locked on me. "Ma'am, we're going to need you to come with us," one of the guards said. "I'm Andrew Miller's mother," I said, my voice shaking. "I was invited." "There's no Teresa Miller on the guest list," Brianna said loudly, walking toward me. "I think she's trying to crash the party. Not, honestly, this is embarrassing." The crowd murmured. I saw the judgment in their eyes, the way they looked at me like I was something dirty that had wandered in from the street. "Check again," I said, my voice rising. "I have the invitation. Andrew invited me." One of the guards pulled out a tablet and scrolled through the list. He frowned. "There's no Teresa Miller here." My stomach dropped. Brianna smiled, triumphant. "I told you. She's not supposed to be here." "Andrew!" I called out, my voice breaking. "Andrew, tell them." He was standing near the stage, frozen, his face pale. For a moment our eyes met, and I saw something flicker there. Shame, maybe, or regret. But he didn't move. He didn't say a word. "Andrew, please," I whispered. Brianna stepped between us, her voice sickeningly sweet. "Andrew, darling, do you know this woman?" The question hung in the air like a noose. He hesitated. The crowd waited. And then, so quietly I almost didn't hear it, he said, I think there's been a misunderstanding." My world shattered. "A misunderstanding?" I repeated, my voice hollow. "Andrew, I'm your mother." He looked away, his jaw tight. "Mum, this isn't the time or place." "Not the time or place?" My voice cracked. "You invited me. You sent me an invitation." Brianna laughed, a high, cruel sound. Oh, sweetie, that was just a formality. We didn't think you'd actually come. The laughter started then, spreading through the crowd like wildfire. I felt it pressing in on me from all sides, suffocating me. The security guard stepped forward. Ma'am, we're going to have to ask you to leave. I looked at Andrew one last time. He still wouldn't meet my eyes. And that's when I felt it. Not sadness, not shame, but a cold, burning rage. I straightened my shoulders. I looked directly at Brianna and said, in a voice loud enough for everyone to hear, "You think this is over. You think you've won. But you have no idea what you've just done." Then I turned and walked out, the sound of laughter following me like a curse. Outside, the night air hit me like a slap. I stood on the grand steps of the hotel, my hands shaking, my vision blurred with tears I refused to let fall. I pulled out my phone and dialed a number I hadn't called in years. "Richard," I said when he answered. "It's Teresa. I need your help." Richard Shaw was Andrew's godfather, a lawyer I had worked for when Andrew was in high school, cleaning his office late at night to earn extra money. He had always been kind to me, always said if I ever needed anything, I should call. "Teresa? It's late. Is everything okay?" "No," I said, my voice steady now. "It's not, but it's about to be." I told him everything. Every humiliating moment, every cruel word, every second of being treated like I didn't matter. My voice didn't waver. I wasn't crying anymore. I was clear, focused, determined. "I need you to help me do something," I said. "Something that will make Andrew remember exactly who built the foundation he's standing on." Richard was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "Come to my office first thing tomorrow morning. Bring any documents you have. Anything related to money you gave him, loans, promises. We're going to remind your son what accountability looks like." I hung up and looked back at the glowing windows of the Grand Imperial Hotel. Inside, the party continued, the music played, the champagne flowed, and somewhere in that sea of laughter and light, my son was celebrating a future that didn't include me. But he was about to learn that the past never stays buried, and mothers never forget. The days that followed were a blur of phone calls, documents, and cold, calculated planning. I met with Richard in his office, a modest space lined with law books and framed degrees. He listened as I told him everything, the humiliation, the laughter, the way Andrew had denied me in front of everyone. "I'm so sorry, Teresa," he said, his voice heavy with sympathy. "You didn't deserve that." "I don't want sympathy," I said. "I want justice." He leaned back in his chair, studying me. "What exactly are you asking for?" "I want to remind my son who built him, and I want Brianna Ashford to understand that some people can't be erased." Richard smiled, a slow, knowing smile. "I think I can help with that." He pulled out a file and opened it, revealing documents I had nearly forgotten about. Years ago, when Andrew first started his company, he needed seed money. The banks wouldn't loan to him. He was too young, too inexperienced. So I had taken out a second mortgage on the small house I owned, the one my mother had left me. I gave him every penny, over $100,000, with the understanding that it was a loan, not a gift. He had signed promissory notes, legal documents promising to repay me with interest. He never had. "He owes you over $300,000 now, with interest," Richard said, tapping the papers. "Legally, you can demand repayment, and if he can't pay—" "His company," I finished. Richard nodded. "A portion of it, yes. Enough to make him listen." I stared at the documents, my heart pounding. This wasn't just about money. This was about recognition, about forcing Andrew to see what he had tried to bury. Do it, I said. The lawsuit was filed 3 days later. Richard had it delivered to Andrew's office, right in the middle of a board meeting. I didn't need to be there to know the look on his face when he opened the envelope. I could imagine it, perfectly. The colour draining from his cheeks, his hands trembling as he read the complaint. Teresa Miller vs. Andrew Miller. Breach of contract and promissory note default. The news spread fast. In the world of business, scandal moves like lightning. Within hours, the story was picked up by local news outlets, then business blogs, then social media. CEO was Mother Money started trending. Reporters camped outside Andrew's office, outside the Grand Imperial, outside Brianna's parents' estate. I watched it unfold from my small apartment, a cup of tea growing cold in my hands. My phone buzzed constantly. Reporters, old friends, people I hadn't heard from in years. I ignored them all, except for one call. Andrew. "Mum," he said, his voice strained. "Please, we need to talk." "Now you want to talk?" I said calmly. "Not when I was being humiliated at your engagement party. Not when your fiancé called me a janitor. Not when you denied knowing me in front of a room full of people. But now, when your reputation is on the line, now you want to talk." "I made a mistake," he said, his voice breaking. "I know I did. But please don't do this. The company, the investors are pulling out. The board is threatening to remove me. Brianna's family is furious. Please." "You're right about one thing," I said. "You made a mistake. But it wasn't at the party. It was years ago, when you forgot who raised you." "I'll pay you back," he said desperately. "Every penny. Just drop the lawsuit, please." "It's not about the money, Andrew. It never was." "Then what do you want?" I paused, letting the silence stretch between us. "I want you to remember," I said finally. "I want you to remember every time you doubted me, every time you let someone disrespect me, every time you chose your pride over your mother. And I want you to know that I will never forget." I hung up. The lawsuit moved forward. Richard was relentless, presenting evidence, promissory notes, bank statements, emails. Andrew's lawyers scrambled, trying to find loopholes, but there were none. The debt was real, the documents ironclad. And then the videos surfaced. Someone at the engagement party had recorded everything. The laughter when Brianna mocked my dress. The moment the waiter handed me the tray of dirty glasses. The security guards escorting me out. Andrew's silence, all of it, captured in high definition and uploaded to the internet. The backlash was swift and brutal. Brianna was eviscerated on social media. Her modelling contracts were cancelled. Her social media accounts were flooded with comments calling her cruel, elitist, heartless. Brands she had partnerships with dropped her overnight. Andrew's company suffered too. Investors pulled funding. Clients terminated contracts. The board held an emergency meeting and issued a statement distancing themselves from his personal conduct. And through it all, I watched from my apartment, feeling no joy, no satisfaction. Just a quiet, hollow sadness. 2 weeks later, Richard called me. "They want to settle." We met in a conference room downtown. Andrew sat on one side of the table, his lawyer beside him. Brianna was there too, her face pale, her eyes red-rimmed. She wouldn't look at me. Andrew looked older, worn down. The confident CEO from the engagement party was gone, replaced by a man who looked lost. "Mum," he said quietly, "I'm sorry." I didn't respond. I just waited. His lawyer slid a document across the table. "We're prepared to repay the full amount of the loan, plus interest, as well as an additional sum as a settlement for emotional distress. I glanced at the number. It was more than I had ever asked for. "And?" I said. Andrew swallowed hard. "And I'm stepping down as CEO. The board has agreed to appoint an interim replacement. I need to figure out who I am again." I looked at him for a long moment. The boy I had raised, the man he had become, and the person he might still be able to be. "And her?" I asked, nodding toward Brianna. Brianna flinched. Andrew glanced at her, then back at me. "The engagement is off," he said quietly. Brianna stood abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor. "This is insane. You're throwing everything away because of her?" "No," Andrew said, his voice firm for the first time. "I'm throwing it away because of me, because of what I let happen." She stared at him, incredulous, then turned and stormed out, slamming the door behind her. The room fell silent. "Mum?" Andrew said again, his voice breaking. "I don't expect you to forgive me. I don't even know if I can forgive myself. But I need you to know that I see it now. I see what I did. And I'm sorry." I reached across the table and took the pen. I signed the settlement agreement, my hand steady. Then I stood. "Andrew," I said, "I didn't do this to punish you. I did it because you needed to remember that respect isn't something you earn once and then forget about. It's something you give, every day, to the people who love you." I walked to the door, then paused and looked back. "And for what it's worth," I said softly, "I do forgive you, but you need to learn to forgive yourself." Then I left. 3 months passed before I heard from Andrew again, not through lawyers, not through messages relayed by Richard, but directly. He called on a Sunday morning, the kind of morning where the light comes in soft and golden through the kitchen window, and the world feels quieter than usual. "Mum?" His voice was tentative, almost childlike. Can I come see you?" I hesitated. Part of me wanted to say no, to keep the distance I had fought so hard to establish. But another part of me, the part that still remembered rocking him to sleep when he had nightmares, the part that had bandaged his scraped knees and celebrated his small victories, that part couldn't let him go entirely. "Yes," I said finally. "You can come." He arrived an hour later, standing at my door with a bouquet of white daisies. Not expensive, not showy, just simple flowers that reminded me of the ones he used to pick from the neighbor's garden when he was 7, presenting them to me with dirt-stained hands and a gap-toothed smile. "I remembered you liked these," he said quietly. I took the flowers and stepped aside to let him in. My apartment was small, nothing like the penthouse he lived in or the sprawling estate Brianna's family owned. But it was mine. The furniture was second-hand, the walls needed fresh paint, but there were photographs on every surface. Pictures of Andrew as a baby, as a boy, as a young man. Pictures of us together, before the money, before the distance. He stood in the middle of the living room, looking around as if seeing it for the first time. Maybe he was. Maybe he had never really looked before. "I've been going to therapy," he said, breaking the silence. 3 times a week. The therapist says I have a lot to unpack." I didn't respond, just busied myself putting the daisies in a vase. "She says I built my entire identity around success, around being someone important, someone impressive. And in doing that, I erased the people who actually mattered. I erased you." His voice cracked on the last word. I set the vase on the kitchen table and finally looked at him, really looked at him. The lines around his eyes were deeper. He'd lost weight. His hair, usually perfectly styled, was slightly disheveled. He looked human, vulnerable, like the boy I used to know. "Why now, Andrew?" I asked. "Why did it take a lawsuit and public humiliation for you to see what was right in front of you?" He sank into a chair, his head in his hands. "I don't know. I think I got so caught up in proving I was good enough, proving I belonged in that world, that I forgot where I came from. I forgot that the only reason I had any of it was because you gave up everything." "I didn't give it up for you to forget me," I said, my voice steady but firm. "I gave it up because I loved you, because I believed in you. But love isn't a transaction, Andrew. It's not something you can cash in and then walk away from." "I know," he whispered. "I know that now." We sat in silence for a long time. Outside, I could hear children playing, their laughter drifting through the open window, life continuing, indifferent to our small drama. "Brianna's gone," he said eventually. "She moved to California. Her family disowned her after the videos went viral. She tried to spin it, tried to say it was all a misunderstanding, but no one believed her. The last I heard, she's working as a receptionist somewhere. Her modeling career is over." I felt a twinge of something, not quite pity, but not satisfaction either. Just a recognition that actions have consequences, even for people who think they're untouchable. "And you?" I asked. "What are you doing now?" "I'm figuring it out," he said. "The company appointed someone else as CEO. I'm still on the board, but in a much smaller capacity. Sold the penthouse. I'm renting a modest apartment downtown, and I'm volunteering." "Volunteering?" He nodded. "At a shelter for families experiencing homelessness, helping people fill out job applications, teaching basic computer skills. It's not glamorous, but it's real. It makes me feel like I'm actually doing something that matters." I studied his face, searching for signs of performance, of insincerity. But all I saw was genuine remorse, genuine change. "I'm proud of you," I said softly. His eyes filled with tears. "Really? Really? Not because of who you were, but because of who you're trying to become." He reached across the table and took my hand. His grip was firm but gentle, the hand of a man who had learned that strength doesn't come from power, but from humility. "I want to make it right, Mom. I know I can't undo what happened, but I want to try. I want to be the son you deserved, not the one you got." "You were always the son I deserved," I said. "You just forgot that for a while." We talked for hours that day, about his childhood, about the mistakes I had made too, about the ways we had both contributed to the distance between us. It wasn't easy. There were tears, moments of anger, long stretches of uncomfortable silence. But it was honest. And honesty, I had learned, was the only foundation worth building on. Before he left, he turned to me at the door and said, "Can I come back? Next week, maybe? Just to talk?" "Yes," I said. "You can always come back." And he did. Week after week, month after month. Slowly, carefully, we rebuilt what had been broken. It wasn't the same as it had been before. We both knew too much, had been hurt too deeply for that. But it was something new, something stronger. A relationship built not on obligation or guilt, but on genuine respect and love. I learned that forgiveness isn't a single moment. It's not a grand gesture or a tearful reunion. It's a series of small choices made day after day to see someone not for their worst moment, but for their capacity to grow beyond it. Andrew learned that success without character is just noise, that the applause of strangers means nothing if the people who raised you can't recognize you anymore. And together, we learned that family isn't just about blood. It's about showing up, even when it's hard. It's about saying, I'm sorry, and meaning it. It's about being seen, truly seen, and choosing to stay anyway. Sometimes, when I'm sitting in my small apartment with my cup of tea and my second-hand furniture, I think about that night at the Grand Imperial Hotel. I think about the laughter, the humiliation, the way I felt like I was drowning in a sea of strangers. And I realize that night wasn't the end of my story. It was the moment I stopped letting other people write it. I am Teresa Miller, 63 years old, a woman who built a CEO with her own hands, who was erased and humiliated and left to stand alone in a ballroom full of people who didn't know her name. But I am also a woman who fought back, who demanded to be seen, who taught her son that love without respect is just a pretty word with no meaning. And in the end, I didn't just survive. I reclaimed myself. If you've ever been made to feel invisible, if you've ever been mocked for your sacrifices, if you've ever wondered if the people you love even see you anymore, know this. Your worth is not determined by the people who overlook you. It is determined by the strength it took to build them in the first place. Dignity is not given, it is claimed. And sometimes, the greatest act of love is teaching the people who hurt you that you are not someone who can be erased. I didn't fight for revenge. I fought for recognition. For the simple, fundamental truth that a mother's love should never be taken for granted, that sacrifice should be honored, not dismissed. And if my story teaches anything, I hope it's this. You don't have to accept being treated as less than you are. You don't have to smile through humiliation. You don't have to be grateful for crumbs when you baked the entire loaf. Stand up. Speak up. Demand the respect you've earned. Because the people who truly love you will listen. And the ones who don't, they'll learn. If this story resonated with you, if it reminded you of your own battles, your own moments of standing up for yourself when the world told you to stay quiet, I want to hear from you. Leave a comment below and share your story. Tell me about the time you chose yourself. Tell me about the moment you stopped shrinking to fit into someone else's idea of who you should be. And if you know someone who needs to hear this, a mother, a grandmother, a friend who has given everything and received nothing, share this video with them. Let them know they are not alone. This is Grandma True Stories, where the forgotten find their voice, where silence is broken, and where every woman who has ever been underestimated gets to tell the truth. Subscribe, hit the bell, and stay with us. Because the stories we tell here don't just entertain, they empower. Your worth is not negotiable, and neither is your voice.